Well, good morning and welcome to part 2 of our community series, which is also our vision for the year, our heart for you as a church for the year. And last week, Jason kicked it off with talking about how it's not good for man to be alone. And Ephesians 4:16, which you'll see on our wall there, it's our new scripture for the year. He makes the whole body, thank you, fit together perfectly as each part does its own special work. It helps the other parts grow so that the whole body is healthy and growing and full of love. And Jason told us that community is messy, but it's also beautiful and worth it. So if you missed out on last week's message, please do download that. Go to our YouTube channel or podcast and have a listen to that message. This morning, I want to ask you a question, and you might need some time to think about this question, or maybe the person next to you will have an immediate answer, and you can ask them afterwards. But what I want to ask you is, if someone were to describe you in one sentence using the word always, what would they say? Good question, right? Would they say, you are always reading? For example, if I say, what is Jason always doing? Jason's always reading. Whether it's reading a book, listening to a book, Jason is always reading. Maybe somebody would say, you're always encouraging. Or maybe they'd say, you're always moaning. Maybe they would say, you see the good in people. Or maybe they would say, you always see the negative. Okay, they might say that you're always working. Maybe you always cooking. Maybe you are always scrolling on TikTok, or if you're an old fogey like me, Facebook. Maybe you're always sharing your faith. Whatever it is, what would someone say about you if they use the word always in a sentence to describe you? We'll get back to that in a moment, but I think you would agree with me that we live in a very selfish, self-centered, self-gratifying, self-promoting society, right? Would you agree with me? We are encouraged to care only about self and to promote oneself. Think about a photograph. If I took a photograph of about 5 or 6 of you, and I came to you and I said, hey, Kian, which photograph do you like? What are you going to look at first in the photograph? Yourself. Okay? You're going to look at yourself, and if you don't look so good, you're going to say, not that one, without even looking at everybody else, okay? Because they don't matter, all right? You're going to look at you, and if that friend posts that picture, what are you going to do? You're going to be like, please delete that picture from your social media or from your WhatsApp or whatever, okay? We are self-centered. We will notice ourselves first before we look at the others. If they post a picture where they look dodgy, we're fine with that. Because as long as we look good, we're happy. The thing is, if you want to follow Jesus, Jesus' teaching, Jesus' way of life is completely opposed to a self-serving, self-centered, self-promoting culture. It's completely opposite to that. Does Jesus say the following? Whoever wants to be my disciple must promote themselves and take up their self-serving cause and follow me. Did he say that? Will you find that in the Bible? Okay, Jesus did not say that. In Matthew 16, verse 24, he said that whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. So he didn't say we must promote ourselves. He said we must deny ourselves and take up what? Our cross. Okay? Not our own cause that we feel is necessary, but the cause of Jesus Christ. Being a Christian means that we are focused on something very different to what the world around us is focused on. So, he wants us to not promote ourselves, but to deny ourselves and then pick up our cross and then follow him. So we have to kill our selfish nature, basically. We have to work at denying our selfish nature and take on the nature of a servant. Take on a nature of someone who cares about others and then follow Jesus. Do you know that serving is not just something we do? Serving, it's an action that reflects who we are. That is why I asked you that question. What are you always doing? So serving is not something that we just do. It's an action and reflects who we are. And that's why that's a good question to ask. What am I always doing? Or what would somebody say I'm always doing? If someone were to answer that question about you, I think it would give a lot of insight about me. I asked the staff on Thursday. Someone said that Racer talks a lot to people, which is a compliment. It means she's always wanting to meet people. Somebody said that I'm sarcastically funny. I was like, okay, that's like a diss and a compliment, but I'll take it. Okay? Or the pre-service prayer, I asked a few people, and Michle said that she would think people would always say she's amazing, but she was joking. Okay, she was joking. But some interesting comments came out, and I think it's a good insight as to what people think of us. And there's actually a verse in the New Testament. It's about it's the first Greek female that is mentioned in the New Testament. And what is so powerful about this verse is that it shows us how important it was that this is what people thought about this lady. Now, for me, when I look at the Bible, I think to myself, if it's there in the Bible, God wants us to know it. Therefore, it must be important to our lives. So in Acts 9, verse 36, it says that in Joppa there was a disciple named Tabitha. In Greek, her name is Dorcas. She can't help that. She was always, but this is very, very important, she was always doing good and helping the poor. Tabitha was known as always doing good and helping the poor. That was her reputation. That's what people could say about Tabitha, that she was always doing good and helping the poor. She was not selfish, she was selfless, but she was using what she had to offer the poor. And we'll come back to that in a moment. That's very important. Tabitha knew who she was. It didn't seem like she was worried about what somebody else was doing or what somebody else was called to do. Tabitha did what she was called to do. And so living a selfless life takes faith. Faith in God and His ways and His plans for us. But you know what else it takes? It takes us choosing to live a faithful life. And so the heading of my message is living a faithful life. And why are we talking about this in the community series? Because how do we live a faithful life in community? What does that look like for us? As followers of Jesus, how do we live a faithful life in community? Because if we're going to call ourselves Christians, if we're going to call ourselves a follower of Jesus, what does that look like for you and for me? So, to live a faithful life, first of all, we need to prioritize seeking God. Because I don't want to just do stuff because I want to tick a box and because it seems right. I want to know what God is asking me to do. I want to take my gifts and talents to God and say, God, what do you want me to use? Or how do you want me to use my gifts and talents? I want to seek God. How do you seek God? You spend time in His Word, you pray, you get around other Christians, and then you will see opportunities arise to live a faithful life in community. Think about Jesus. I mean, Jesus really lived a faithful life in community. He did things that we would not find easy to do, like washing His disciples' feet. He healed the sick, but He didn't just heal them. He didn't just care for the oppressed and the rejected, but He saw them. When the woman with the issue of blood came to Him and touched his garment, He didn't see her, but then he made an effort to see her. So you can look at someone or you can see them. The way that Jesus lived a faithful life in community was he did these things. He fed the crowds. He healed people. Yes, he washed his disciples' feet, but he saw them. And that is how he wants us to live. He wants us to follow his examples. He wants us to live faithful lives in our areas of influence. I cannot live a faithful life in Marco's area of influence, in Race's area of influence, in Celia's area of influence. I can only live a faithful life in my area of influence. I need to be faithful where I am at, what is in my hands, what is my gifts and abilities, and be faithful with that. And that's all God is asking you to do, is to see where you can be faithful. Another way that he wants us to live a faithful life in community is by empowering others. Now, this one is passionate on my heart. How can we be faithful in empowering others? All right? We can empower someone when we encourage them with words and when we support them with our gifts and our talents. That's how we can empower others. You can empower the younger generation, you can empower your peers, and you can empower those older than you. Because sometimes we just need a word of encouragement. You know, you might go through your day, and this is what I used to be like, where I would think good things about people. I would think good things about what people are doing and things that people said, but I wouldn't say it because I was shy to say it. But when God challenged me and I started saying it, I realized that people need encouragement as much as I do. People need a word from God as much as I do. Last week, after church, or was it the week before, a guy came up to me after church. I don't know him very well. I've met him a few times, and he gave me a word of encouragement. And it's what I needed. It built me up. It confirmed something about my character, and it was good for me. And so when we get to empower others, we get to do that by either speaking life, maybe sending someone to stand camp is a way of empowering the next generation. It's paying maybe for someone to do music lessons. It's getting alongside someone and mentoring them. Maybe you're a leader in your business and you can take a young person under your wing and walk with them and mentor them. There's many ways to empower people. Think about the 3 servants who were given money when their master went away. They were given, the first servant 5 bags, the second 2 bags, the third 1 bag, and they were asked to take care of what they had been given. When the master came back, the first guy doubled his money and now had 10 bags. The second guy also doubled his money and had 4 bags. And the third servant, he was afraid to use what he had been given, so he hid it. Do any of us relate to that? We hide what God has put in us and what God has given us, the gifts and talents and abilities. We hide it. And what did the master say to that servant? He called him wicked and lazy. But what did he say to the other 2? In Matthew 25, verse 21 and 23, but I'll read from 21. He said, the master was full of praise. He said, well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in handling the small amount. So now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together. God is just asking us to be faithful with what he has given us. When we get to heaven one day, I don't think God is going to say, well done, good and successful servant. Well done, good and wealthy servant. Well done, good and happy servant. Even though God is most likely totally fine with you being those things, I don't think God has any issue with you being successful, wealthy, happy. But I don't think that that's a top priority for him. When you get to heaven, and you've lived a life that pleases him, he is going to say, well done, good and faithful servant. Faithful servant. There's no better goal in life than to live a faithful life. That should be our goal. Now, the thing is that you get to decide to be faithful, though. You get to choose. You get to get up every morning and say, I choose to be faithful. I will be faithful. God, show me opportunities where I can be faithful. I am choosing this. We get to pre-decide. Because I don't know about you, but when I have been faithful, because maybe I didn't think about it too much and I had a really good day and I was in good spirits and, I was faithful in that area. I was faithful there. That's very few and far between. Unfortunately, it's not normal and common to just be faithful. We have to be intentional. You're not just going to be faithful day after day after day after day. Why? Because it's not easy to be faithful. It's far easier to let go of those things you know you need to be faithful in. It's convenient to sometimes not be faithful. I gave this example, and it's not a great example, but it's just a little one. It's like, I am a very zippy person. I walk fast, I talk fast, I eat fast, but I also drive fast. And so in order for me to be faithful according to the laws of the land, I need to constantly watch my speedometer and make sure that I'm not speeding. And it's not because I'm speeding on purpose. It's because I am a zippy person. I want to get there. I want to get there now. Okay? But that doesn't mean that I can just, that's who I am. No. It's convenient for me to not be faithful, but that doesn't mean that I shouldn't be faithful where I know that I'm failing. Compromising our values is very convenient, but there's always a cost. When you compromise your values, when you're not faithful, there's always a cost. And faithfulness honors God, and so God honors faithfulness. God is far less concerned. He's happy for it, but he's far less concerned with the sort of certain parts of Christian ministry. You know, the parts that are important, but they're not the be all and end all. What God is most concerned about is our hearts. Are our hearts in the right place? Are we challenging our hearts? Are our hearts faithful? Are our hearts faithful within the community that we are living in, within the community that we do church together in, or where we work? You see, every interaction is an opportunity to add value to our neighbor, and every prompting is an opportunity to obey God. Can I say that again? Every interaction is an opportunity to add value, and every prompting is an opportunity to obey God. We get to pre-decide if we want to be faithful. Imagine if you were so intentional that every time you walked into a room, you decided that you were going to be the one who changes the atmosphere in the room, to be a positive, life-giving, God-honoring atmosphere. Imagine if you were intentional with that. Imagine if you were intentional with where you spend your days. I'm going to be faithful. I'm going to be the person that is blessed to be a blessing. Doesn't matter how much you have or how little you have, you decide that you're going to be a blessing. Because every time we decide that, it's an opportunity to obey God. Every time. And you may be thinking to yourself, but I'm just one person. I don't have a lot. I'm very busy. You don't know what my life looks like. Or maybe you're thinking, but I don't have many opportunities. I work from home. I'm not around colleagues. I'm quite an introvert. I'm not around many people. Let me tell you that there are people in our church who I know who work from home, for example. They don't have many opportunities naturally around them with colleagues, and they're not married. But this person that I'm thinking of in particular, she chooses to be a blessing. She will invite people over. She will make meals for people and bring them to their house and have meals together. She blesses people financially in her little or in her lot. Because you get to choose to be faithful in community. So it's never, ever about what somebody else is doing or what somebody else has. It's about what God has put in your hand, where He has placed you to work, where He has placed you in your hobbies or in your family. And so I want to share a beautiful true story with you about a woman called Linda Wilson Allen. Now, Linda Wilson Allen was not a politician, and she was not a celebrity. Linda Wilson Allen was a bus driver in San Francisco, and she made it into the newspaper and onto TV and in a local church in San Francisco quite a few years ago because of how she stood out in her community. So what Linda did was she believed and she saw her work as her ministry. She said, my work is my ministry. I'm a bus driver. That's where I get to be faithful in my community. So if she would be driving the bus and see somebody struggling to get onto the bus, she would get out of her seat, help them onto the bus. Then at their stop, she would get out of her seat, help them off the bus. There's one lady who was in her 80s who was struggling to get into the bus with her groceries. Linda got out of her seat, helped her put all the groceries onto the bus, and when she got to her stop, got out of her seat and helped her get off the bus. That this old lady now waits at the bus stop till Linda's bus comes past to make sure she gets onto Linda's bus. And the story goes on that one day she saw this lady get onto the bus, and she was like, I don't know this lady on this route. She's new. And she looked a bit lost. She was kind of looking around. And so she introduced herself, and she said to her as she was getting onto the bus, are you new to town? And she said, I'm just visiting. I'm here for a while. So what did she do? She invited her. She's a single mom, by the way, of 6 kids, this Linda, the bus driver. She invited her to Thanksgiving with her 6 kids. And now they're friends. They actually visit each other. She's from Atlanta. Linda's in San Francisco. And they became friends. But what's so amazing about Linda and her seeing her job as her ministry is that she has to start, her trip starts very early in the morning. She gets up at 2:30 in the morning to pray and ask God, show me how you can use me today. Not only does she pray that, she also says, God, if there's anything about my attitude that you need to work on, please show me today. And then she continues to pray throughout her day as she sees opportunities to be a blessing. She's a famous bus driver because she sees opportunities to add value. And I love that about her story. Look at 1 Peter 4 verse 10. It says that each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others. Not whatever gift I've received, whatever gift you've received. And you must use those gifts as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. So as I said, it's not about where you spend your days, it's about how you spend your days. It's about choosing to be faithful. It's about pre-deciding. You never know how God is going to use one word of encouragement, 1 5 rand, one meal, one kind gesture to bless that person and to change their entire day. I want to share some personal stories with you, and some of them are personal to me. Some are stories that I've heard, because I believe that there's nothing better than hearing what other people do and have done to be a blessing. And the first one is, for those of you that know Auntie Anne, who she attends the first service, her and her husband, Uncle Mike, were in our church for years and years, and he developed a disease where he lost all motor function, and he was basically in a wheelchair or in his bed. He couldn't move. And it got to the point where Auntie Anne was unable to put him into his bed. And so a group of 5 people, 5 men in this church decided to get together, one of those being Ryan. He was 13 at the time. Decided to get together and help Auntie Anne put Uncle Mike to bed every night for 6 years. Not for 1 year, not for 2 years, for 6 years. And I spoke to her about it this morning, and I asked her about it. And the one thing that she said that really stood out to me was that at one point they got like a hoist that would help put him into bed. And so she said to these men, who were all dads of young children at the time, you guys don't have to carry on coming. You've got small children. You need to be at home. You know, it's bedtime, it's bath time, and help them get to bed. And she said that the one wife said to her, "No, Auntie Anne, this is how our children get to see what it means to love God according to our gifts and talents. What God has put inside of them." And you know what's so encouraging for me is that every single one of those children who were little at the time are serving God today. Because they got to see what their dads were doing in helping somebody. They each had a turn one night of the week to go and put Uncle Mike to bed. Another example is, I won't mention names to embarrass anyone, but at the men's event, for those of you that know, Jason has been on a very, very intentional health journey so that he can get healthy and get his cholesterol down. And so he eats very specific things and he cuts very specific things out. And somebody approached Jason and said, "Can I buy you a meal?" Because he knew Jason couldn't eat the meal that was being sold at the men's event. And he brought Jason a meal. Just a meal once off, but that meant a lot to Jason. When my niece was 2 months old, we took custody of her, full custody. And I was working as the children's pastor at View Church Tableview. 3 morning services, Jason was working as the pastor of View Church Milnerton. And we were like, now what do we do? I can't look after this 2-month-old baby on a Sunday morning. And like we didn't know what to do. And I had 2 friends who were attending Milnerton. And at that stage, they weren't serving anywhere. And they signed up with me. When I say signed up, they spoke to me and Jason about looking after Madison. I think it was maybe for about 2 years. And what they would do is I would take her with me to church. They would fetch her from me. They would bring her to Milnerton. They would look after her. Neither of these ladies were moms. They would then leave her when Jason was done for the morning and preaching, talking to people, doing what he needed to do. They would wait. They would then give Madison to Jason, and he would take her home. Again, they saw a need, they saw an opportunity, and added value. It's like Zoe looking after Seth so Talent can go to work. Maybe there is a fostering opportunity, or maybe you've got a place in your heart where you think, you know what, our home, I think we've got space to adopt a child. You know, all of that at first takes you out of your comfort zone. All of these things I've mentioned, it's going to be difficult. It's not going to be easy, but it's a blessing to others. Maybe it's holding babies in the parents' room. Maybe it's sharing an encouraging word. Craig Rochelle shared a story. Him and his wife were on holiday, and they were walking on the beach one day, and he said to his wife, "I've got this sinking feeling I need to make a phone call to this guy," but he had left his phone back in the hotel. He walked 30 minutes back to his hotel room to phone his friend. Then, as his friend answered, realizing it was the middle of the night where his friend was, and his friend said to him, "Why are you phoning me?" "Oh, I'm sorry, I felt like God got me to," and he was like explaining that he didn't realize the time change, and then his friend stopped him and he said, "Why are you phoning me?" He said, "God told me to phone you." He was about to take his own life. It's just looking for the opportunities. It's listening to the God prompts. It's obeying. It's taking what is in your hand and using that to be a blessing. Jason has to take marriage documents into Home Affairs regularly. He's a marriage officer, and so he does many weddings where he just does the legals. And so every second week he'll drive to Home Affairs, and there's this one particular lady that's the only one he wants to deal with. Like sometimes if she's not there, he'll even leave and go back the next day. She's a Christian, and she has made it so easy for him to work with her at Home Affairs because she wants to be a blessing. She gives advice. She helps out where documents were missing or wrong. She tells him exactly what to do. She doesn't moan at him. She doesn't swear at him. She doesn't make his life uncomfortable. When he asks her questions about, because we've had to do a lot of stuff at the refugee Home Affairs to help our daughter, when he's asked questions, she's gone out of her way to help him, to give answers, to say who he can talk to. She looks for an opportunity to add value, and she adds value. We've got a neighbor 2 doors away from us. Her husband has passed away now, but he had a stroke a few years ago. And there would be times where he would fall and she would be unable to help him up, and she knew that she could knock on our door. Even when Jason didn't feel like it, he would go and this guy was very big and very heavy, and he would help to get this guy back into his bed or into his chair. Again, I'm only using stories that I know. This isn't to make Jason look like amazing or anything. You've got stories that you would know. This is to show you that it's the little things, it's the medium things, and sometimes the bigger things. What I'm trying to encourage you with today, church, is that you can choose to be faithful where you are. In your workplace, where you live, in your street, in your local shop, where your hobbies are, you can be faithful. I'll give you another example. Again, our neighbors across the road, they are Christians. The one day when our daughter Mish was here on holiday in December, she asked me about crocheting. And I just looked at her. I said, I'm sorry, Mish, you got the wrong mother. I don't even know where to start with crocheting. But she really wanted to crochet. So I said, okay, let me ask on the WhatsApp group for our street. So I put it on there. And our neighbor across the road said, I've got crochet needles. What size do you need? I said, I don't know. I don't even know what a crochet needle looks like. She said, come over. Mish spent 2 hours at her house, her teaching Mish what to do with different size needles, showing her patterns. Guys, she wasn't saving Mish's life. She wasn't paying her rent. There was an opportunity that she saw, and she chose to add value. Do you get what I'm saying? We get to choose to add value where we are. And so all we have to do is get with God. Just get with God and say, God, what do you want from me today? How can I be a blessing? Where can I add values? And then see people. See people. And maybe today isn't that day. That's okay. God's not going to whip you over the back and say, today you didn't give that person the 5 rand I kind of encouraged you to give. But you try tomorrow again, and the next day, and the next day. And you choose to live a faithful life. Wherever you are and whatever you are doing, you can look for opportunities to be faithful. You can use what God has given you. It's that simple. I have a prayer that I want to pray over you in a moment, but when I feel like this prayer is almost a declaration where you get to choose to like what I'm going to pray, to actually hear those words, and either you're going to say yes, 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 or you are going to be like, yes, no. Wherever you are in your life, can I ask you to just have an open heart, to just be willing to hear what God might be saying to you? Won't you please stand as we close?